I mean, the death of my husband was so hard on me. I really didn't think I would survive it. I feel like a lot of what I have kind of talked about here is me and my journey and the things that I've done, because that's so relevant to what I can offer someone.
Yeah.
But make no mistake, it was the hardest time of my life, and I was devastated, when he died. But we did, I took care of him, but he took care of me too, you know? And we had something very special.
Welcome to the Resilience Reborn podcast. We are your hosts, Angie
and Trey Easley. Each episode, we bring you powerful stories of people who have faced unimaginable challenges and emerged stronger.
We'll find hope together, one story at a time. Now, let's dive in. Hi, and welcome to the Resilience Reborn podcast. I am your host, Angie Easley. I am so excited today. We have Jennifer Lloyd here with us, and she has quite an amazing story. So today we're going to dive deep into Jennifer's story. So just to start out, Jennifer, can you just give us a little bit of background about yourself and your story, and then we'll kind of go from there?
Yeah, there's a lot, and I feel like it's all intertwined. So I don't know if there's any one real good starting point, but maybe I'll just kind of talk a little bit about our connection and how that kind of brought my story out. We met not too long ago through a mutual friend, and one of the things I think that the thing that we connected on was obviously we had both lost our spouse. My husband passed away 4 years ago. Actually, it was about a week ago was the anniversary date of his death. And he had cancer. He lived with it for almost 5 years. And he, like I said, he passed away. And we met about a year before his diagnosis. So we were together and he was diagnosed. And, we kind of went the full gamut of going through all the treatment. And eventually, things just, stopped working and he ended up passing away. So I think that's kind of like the big crux of my story, but obviously so much that goes along with that. And, how do you handle going through that when it was not a terminal diagnosis, but it was an incurable diagnosis.
Right.
So you kind of, the process of living your life and going through, the time that you have. And then how do you get through it? Like, how do you, survive after? And that was really, I think that's really kind of the story, right? Because the incident, the death is something that happens. And then it's like, what do you do now? Like, how do you deal with it? How do you grieve? How do you get through it all?
And then I know just to kind of touch on it, just for you had another added part into the story, maybe just shared that briefly.
Yeah. So when my husband passed away, I had been sober for 11 months. Before, I had always been a drinker, kind of like the original partier, always the one at the center of everything, always the last one there, the last one taking a drink. And I got to a point where I just realized that it was super unhealthy. There were some obviously some catalysts to me making the decision, but I chose, to quit drinking. So May 19th, 2019 was the day I'd quit drinking. And so I was only sober for 11 months at the time that my husband died. I remember thinking to myself, because in the early days of sobriety, for anyone who's kind of gone through that journey, either themselves or with somebody, it's always one day at a time, but it's truly like 1 hour, 1 minute, 1 hour, 1 day, 1 month at a time. And so those were very early days. So even though I wanted to stay sober, your commitment's kind of like, it's not as strong because I think that just comes with time, the longer that you're going through something.
Right.
And so when I remember the last couple of weeks of Mike's life, when I knew that it was kind of the time was coming, I was literally making deals with myself. Like, if he dies, I'm drinking. I don't care. You know what I mean? Nobody can fault me for that. You know what I mean? It was almost like it was kind of an excuse though, because when he did die, obviously there were a lot of people at my home. He passed away at home, and my sister, remember that later that day after he passed away, my sister was trying to get all the alcohol out of the house. And there wasn't really that much alcohol in the house at that point, but there was still some.
Right.
And I was like, what are you doing? And she was like, I'm getting this stuff out of here so you don't drink. And so angry at her, because I was like, I'm not going to take a drink. This is not, you don't have to do this or whatever. And it surprised me because I had this build up to that day, right? Like he dies, I'm drinking. Like I don't care. And I didn't.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to.
Yeah, that's amazing.
It was because I really shocked me because I literally did not expect me to have that reaction. I mean, literally, like, this is the worst day of my life, right? My husband just died and I didn't want to drink.
Right.
I had his phone at that time. And obviously, like, you know, leading up to that day, you know, he was not very, you know, coherent at all times. So I had his phone, and I remember looking through his phone, and I was looking at his calendar, and it said on May 19th, which was like the next month coming up, there was something on that date, and it said, Jen, 1 year, no wine. And I remember thinking, like, he didn't really know, like, he didn't care if I was drinking or not, or, you know, like there had been a previous time, about 2 years before when I, you know, was thinking, you know, I'm going to stop drinking. And I did for like about 5 weeks. But when I talked to him about it and I was like, you know, I think I have a drinking problem. And he's like, you don't have a drinking problem. You know, you just overdrink too much. And I'm like, wait a minute. I was like, you don't tell me that I don't. Like, I tell you that I do.
Right. And because us on the other side, we don't see that, and we don't want to say you have a drinking problem. So we're just like, we think you, because that's what I told with my husband, Trey.
Yeah.
I just think you drink too much, right?
Yeah. And so, but ironically, you know, I think that at that point in time, like, he was, you know, going through treatment or whatever, maybe he just couldn't handle one more thing. Right. You know what I mean? So if he had to take care of me, you know, that was just too much, you know? So I kind of like didn't really know how he truly felt about like my sobriety because of previous conversations we had about it. And so when I saw that, I was like, wow, I was like, he knew the date. Like he was proud of me. And I was like, I can't use this as an excuse to go back.
So that's what you needed. That's, you know, that's a very, very important like piece of this whole story.
It did. It like really held me together. Like, I feel like, and there were times where, you know, when you're sober, I think you hit that 1 year. Okay, now I'm like, I'm really committed. You know what I mean? Because I've done it. And like, obviously, like and every year and every milestone, you know, it's like, it's a big deal because, you know, it's confirmation that you're actually doing this.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I did not take a drink, obviously, and I didn't want to.
Yeah.
You know, there was this huge buildup to it. Like, I was going to do it, and then I didn't want to when it actually happened for a lot of reasons. I mean, obviously him and, you know, knowing that he was proud of me and that he had the date on his calendar was one. But I just think, like, I would have been such a mess. Like, I would have been such a train wreck if I was drinking. Or if I started drinking
while going through that.
There are so many things to think about, so many things to do, your emotions. You know, part of one of the things that I realized when I quit drinking was that, yes, it's hard at first because physically, like, your body is addicted to something.
Right.
But what I realized the biggest thing is that I never dealt with anything. Like, I survived things, I went through things, but like, I never actually like processed the emotion.
Yep.
And I think that was hard. Like, even in the months before he died. I mean, when I quit drinking, it wasn't like he was dying.
Yeah.
Like, it wasn't until about 6 months before where things really kind of like took a turn. So for those first couple of months, like, I was, you know, it was just like normal, you know, business as usual. And what I started thinking, like, stress, just daily stress. I was like, I want to drink. But it didn't.
Yeah.
When, you know, after I quit, because I was like processing, like, how do I get through this emotion without covering it up?
Right.
And that's the biggest thing. So, like, obviously when my husband passed away, I had to get through it and deal with it instead of just putting a Band-Aid on it and covering it up.
Yeah. Because you probably had done that for years and years and years.
Oh, my whole life.
Yeah.
I mean, literally, like, ever since I probably started drinking when I was 16, you know, I mean, my whole life. How many years is that? Like,
a long time.
25 or so.
And that, you know, and that's the same thing with Trey. That's, you know, it was probably 15 when he started.
Yeah.
And from that moment forward, it was just covering everything up, and a drink will make me feel better, and and
it's a gradual build into something else. Yeah. When I was probably 17, I wanted to go to this party, and my mom said I couldn't go, and I went anyway. My sister took me, and I forgot I was on antibiotics. So apparently antibiotics don't mix really well with drinking. And I had a couple drinks, you know, I mean, I was a teenager, it wasn't that many. And I was so sick. And when we got home, and my grandmother happened to be sleeping overnight that night, and because we were having some like type of family party or something the next day, and I was sicker than a dog. So the whole house knew it. You know, it was a small house. I mean, there's no way to hide it. And I remember having this conversation with me in the driveway the next day about drinking. And it running in my family and becoming an alcoholic. And I'm like, I'm not an alcoholic. I'm a teenager. Like, I'm just having fun. I'm just drinking and, you know, but she knew, you know, like she knew where it could lead.
Yeah.
I don't know that I would have listened or made any other choice back then.
Of course. Yes.
But I feel like, you know, the ironic part is that when I decided to quit drinking, it wasn't like I chose a day. I just had a really bad experience the night before. You know, I drove under the influence. It was not a good situation. And I literally woke up and I hated myself. You know, I hated the choice that I made.
Right.
I hated that I was like kind of, you know, attached to this addiction. And that next day was my grandmother's birthday.
Oh, wow.
And I don't even know, like, it was conscious that I even remembered it at the time.
Oh, probably not.
But it was May 19th, and I was like, May 19th, you know, my grandmother's birthday, and she was, you know,
the first one who actually had that conversation.
She had that conversation with me.
Isn't that amazing how things just...
It was a weird thing, and she was an alcoholic before I was born. I don't ever remember her drinking, like, you know, as a child, but she never drank when I was, you know, old enough to remember it. But so the fact that she knew she had gone through it, she was the first person to like have that conversation with me, and then it ended up being her birthday. Yeah. So
that's pretty. That's pretty cool. I mean, not cool, but you know,
it is. It's cool in the sense of
that it just like came full circle, right?
Yeah.
That's
so in May, in a couple of weeks, May 19th will be my 5-year anniversary of
congratulations
being sober.
That's amazing.
Yeah. I'm like 5 years, you know, it's like 5 years is one of those things where you're like, I don't know how I can get through a couple of weeks of doing this. I'm like, 5 years seems crazy to me, but like, there's no doubt in my mind that, you know, I'm a sober person for life. I don't think that I could take 1 or 2 drinks and just, you know, keep it there. It would eventually snowball. So,
and I'm sure at this point you love who you are now. In comparison to, you know,
I do. I like myself sober. I never was like a angry drunk or a, you know, a belligerent drunk, but I do. But people have told me stories of things that I did when I was drinking, not necessarily in a bad light. You know, they might say it and like laugh, like, "Oh, remember when you did this or did that?" And I kind of like cringe. I'm like.
Right.
Like, I must have made such a fool of myself. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I know there were a lot of fun times.
Right.
And, you know, they are what they are, but that part of my life is done.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And it just kind of it wasn't like this thing that happened on its own. It kind of got wrapped up with the death of my husband because it was so close in time. You know, when both of those things kind of started like really like, you know, came to fruition. So my story has a lot to do with both things kind of wrapped up and how I went through the process of grieving after losing my husband. It was all kind of wrapped up in being sober, which is its own experience. Right. So when you're talking about a life change, you know, and holding on to it when you're going through like the worst thing in your life.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I know that I did it and I know how I did it, but I also look back and go, I don't know how I did it.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
How I survived it, but how I didn't drink. Like, just knowing my previous self, you know?
Right. Right. Well, and I can't speak to being sober or, you know, having a problem with alcohol, but I think just that clarity that you have, I mean, and thank goodness that you chose to start that journey of sobriety before your husband passed away.
100%. Like,
so there is just this, it has this way of working out. And, you know, I think that you probably just had that clarity and you knew that was never a place you wanted to go back to.
Yeah.
And not that your conscious mind knew that was a place you just couldn't be anymore and that you could not cover up things. So I think
That's what I did.
Probably, yes.
I covered everything up with alcohol.
And so I think
everything.
just like, even though that wasn't at the forefront, maybe that, your subconscious was, no, this is who I am now. This is me sober. And this is the only way that I'm going to be able to deal with this.
Yeah. I mean, you're right. I mean, I don't know that I could have quit drinking during that time. So if I wasn't already sober, who knows?
Who knows?
I would have been, I mean, honestly, I would have been a train wreck. Like I feel like I would have made a lot of bad choices for myself and my grieving instead of really just focusing on me and just getting through it and like taking the time for myself and just being alone and, dealing with my emotions and, my loss.
Yeah.
Without adding unhealthy behaviors into it, so to speak.
Right. Okay, so let me see. Just tell us a little bit about how you navigated your grief during, after your husband died and during. I know you've touched a little bit on the sobriety, but how did you navigate grief? Like, what are some of the things that you did?
I mean, that's one of those things I feel like it's kind of all intertwined with each other, right? So there's a couple of different things and they all kind of got, mixed together, so to speak, in the whirlpool of figuring it all out. But so my husband passed away April 15th, 2020. Very, very beginning of COVID. We really had only been kind of quarantined less than a month at that point. And that was, I think it kind of shaped the journey a little bit because obviously people were separated. There wasn't a lot of in-person contact. I remember the first couple of weeks of COVID, my husband was obviously very ill at that point. And, you don't know what you don't know about it. So you're just being so extra cautious. So like we didn't go out like neighbors would we'd like make a store list and people on our neighborhood listserv would say, anybody need, and so we were very quarantined. We wouldn't even we would talk to people through the windows if they came by. Like we wouldn't even open like a window or anything like that. Because I said to him, if you get this, it's going to kill you.
Yeah.
The irony of it, because he died of cancer like less than 2 weeks later. But navigating that time when people weren't really allowed to come together was really tough. Obviously, the day that my husband passed, that morning, we kind of knew that it was coming. And so everyone just came, his family and his kids and my family and some friends. And we just kind of threw caution to the wind. Like nobody was wearing a mask. Like we just kind of that day was that day.
Yeah.
But after that, it was tough because everybody was kind of separated and people's, I had good friends that would come over, but they also had to be concerned about their families and their kids and their, spouses. So, there wasn't a lot of, in the beginning, there were certain people, very close friends, Bonnie and Terry of my husband's. They were the ones that kind of kept me up. I think they propped me up for a good 2-3 months. One of them came to my house every day.
Yeah.
So just the power of people, I think about that's a big commitment. Going over to someone's house every day when you have your own life. They really, really propped me up. I don't know that I could have gotten through those first couple of months without them.
Yeah.
And then, I think what I try to do was, there was a lot of self-reflection. I was very busy. I mean, whenever there's a death of a spouse or a partner, there's so much to do.
Yeah.
My husband owned a business. So I really focused on, the business and it was a home improvement business. So, and he was the business with just a couple employees.
Yeah.
So there was the process of going through everything at his shop, getting everything over to my house so that I could start working on selling it, taking care of the employees, so that they were taken care of. Going through, it was his year end because his annual fiscal year ended in March. So he had been ironically, he was working on his taxes, trying to get his taxes done before he passed. And I said, why don't you just show me this and I'll do it, So I was working on the taxes and I got to know his accountant. And so I was just staying very busy.
Yeah.
And so I feel like when you lose somebody, whether it's, whatever it is, finding a way to stay busy because your inclination is just to stay home and to close the doors, lock the doors and close all the window shades and just be alone and be miserable. And you need some of that. You do.
Yeah.
But it can't be everything. You need to get out and do something to make yourself feel like there's something bigger than you and what you're going through in your grief. I did a lot with my husband's business. That took a lot of time.
Yeah.
I really enjoy yard work, and my husband and I had customized our yard. And it was spring. So I'm like, get out there, get the garden going, plant the flowers. He passed away 3 days after Easter that year, and he had ordered me Easter flowers. And instead of flowers like a bouquet, he ordered a bunch of flowers to plant.
Okay.
And they were black-eyed Susans. So they literally arrived the day after he passed away. Oh. And my sister was there, my mom was there, his son was there, and I was like a crazy person. I was like, we have to get out in the yard. We have to plant these flowers today. These flowers cannot die.
They can't die.
If these flowers die, I can't take that. So we were all out in the yard. We were doing yard work the day after he passed away.
Isn't it crazy?
It's just being so so your brain can't think about what you're dealing with.
Yes. And now when I look back on, and people actually remind me of things that I did, it's crazy to think that that's what you were doing. Yeah. So you threw yourself into the business that you had to kind of make sure that everything was squared away with that. Yard work.
I did a lot of yard work.
Yeah.
I started doing my neighbor's yard work when I was done with my own yard work. Yeah. And everyone's like, why are you doing this? Do you want, and I'm like, no, I just want to do yard work.
Yeah. And it was just to keep your mind in a place, and I'm sure, we were talking earlier about, with sobriety and addiction that, I see with my husband that he tends to just go from one thing to another. Right. So that was probably
stay busy.
Yes. That was probably part of it, that you were just keeping your mind busy and throwing yourself into other things to kind of take that edge off. Right.
Because I think and you obviously, will understand this as well. When someone dies, especially a spouse, grief is grief. So, it doesn't take away from any other type of loss. But I think when you lose a spouse, it's your everyday person. Yeah. It's your everyday life. It's your routine. It's not someone who is somebody that you may not see every day, which again, it's still a loss is a loss, but I think it's on a different level because you are your daily routine is completely shifted and you're dealing with it. And I think it's so hard. You can't just start dealing with it right away. Right. I think that it's so deep and it's such a hard wound that doing other things is, especially in the beginning, is just keeping busy, is just kind of getting through it. You don't have to process it right away. You don't have to deal with it emotionally right away.
Yeah, I don't know that we do.
You just survive the day.
We even have.
And your brain, you do these other things that helps to kind of just get through it, to keep breathing, putting one foot in front of the other. And then later, and there's no timeline, but it just kind of happens where it's a different time for everybody. You start the healing process, right? And I don't think that means you're oh, I'm starting today and a year from now I'm good.
Right.
But it's a lifelong journey. Yeah. But at least in the beginning, you find ways to just kind of put one foot in front of the other. My husband has children from previous relationships, and his youngest daughter was 5 when he passed away, and her mom and I formed a friendship, and I spent a lot of time with his daughter. And, even to this day, I feel when I'm with her and I'm spending time with her, it's really the only time that it was a big pain back then. Yeah. And now it's like an underlying, gnawing thing that maybe just is always there. But when I'm with her is even when it was big and wherever it is now, I don't feel it. It helps me to kind of take a break from it. I mean, because I feel you got to take a break from your grief. That's the other thing. You because it's so much and it's so heavy and it's so hard and you just got to take a break from it. I mean, even if that's just a trip or spending time with a friend you haven't seen for a while, you know what I mean? Just have a weekend where you're not thinking about grieving because you need it.
And I agree 100%. For me, that came with guilt. And I don't know how that is for you. And, we all are in different seasons of our life when things happen. But when I found myself even having the slightest bit of joy, I would feel guilty.
Survivor's guilt.
Yes, because and everybody tells you they wouldn't want for you to be sad and be miserable, you know, and that's like one of the things that I wish nobody would have ever said to me.
No,
you know, I heard that.
Like, how do you know?
Yes.
Like, you know what I mean?
And, but at the same time, like just that one little sliver of like joy would put me into, wait, is this how I'm supposed to be feeling?
Yeah. Well, I definitely don't think that it's something that you do right away, right? I think that after some time has passed, I did the exact same thing. In fact, I had like these games that I would there's these two games that are very similar that I would play on my phone. And one of them he played also. And when he died, like I didn't play that game for I didn't play any games for like 9 months. It was the weirdest thing. I couldn't bring myself to play my games because I felt like that meant that I was like doing something that I was enjoying you know what I mean? And I was like, I can't have any joy. I can't have any, you know what I mean? I was like, exactly the same way.
There's so many things that we feel are attached to it, or society, you know, make us feel that this is not the right thing to do, or it's so strange. It is so strange. And then the further along you get in your journey, it's like you find out that that's not the truth, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, it totally is. When I kind of referenced taking a break from my grief, I think it was about 1.5 years in, I went to see a friend who was living in San Diego. And that trip for me was like, obviously I wanted to spend time with her, but it was like the first time that I can really remember taking a break. Like I was out there and I was just like, you know, relaxing and reading and, you know, it's not to say that it's not on your mind. It's just that it was like a little bit of a break where I didn't have to do anything. You can't run away from it. You can't move. You can't, you know what I mean? There's nothing you can do to run away from it. But I think that when some time has passed, you can allow yourself to have moments where you aren't like tied to this feeling of grief and guilt. Yeah. Because it's a very natural thing. I mean, when you start to feel happiness, I think you and I had talked about this a little bit when we first met. I'm like, I'm having a good day. I'm feeling happy. And then I have this moment where I'm like, I'm actually aware that I'm happy. Yeah. And nothing is stressing me right now and I'm good. Yeah. And then like the next minute, I'm down. Yes. You know, and the emotions just all of a sudden they flood in and they're like, oh, no. You're not okay. Like, don't even try. You're grieving. You're here. And I think that's the thing. I think you refer to it as like a waiting room where it's just always there waiting for you. And, you know, it's normal. Like, I think, you know, it's not easy and it sucks, but it's normal, I think, because you're like, this person that you loved is gone and dead and not coming back ever. And you're living. And there's like, you know, there's definitely some guilt in that. But it's not like you did anything or they did anything or whatever. I think it's just natural stuff that comes out, you know, out of a tragic loss.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that 100%. Do you remember any specific triggers or moments that, you know, that you had like the temptation throughout your grief journey with your sobriety, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Like, was there any certain thing that you just really remember that you were like almost there? I mean, I know that you had said you really didn't have the need to drink.
Yeah, in the beginning, for sure. I was like, I'm not doing it. Like, I don't need it. I think that when you start to feel a little better through your grief journey, whatever timeline that is, 1 year, 2 years, whatever. For me, a lot of people said at the 2-year mark, it's so much different. You'll be feeling so much better. And I'm like, well, I'm never going to feel better. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like that was my mentality. And the first year is like this year is, you know, like of like firsts. And then, you know, you get through all of those dates. There was something at 2 years that I felt like, I'm like, okay, you know what I mean? This is normal now. And so when that comes and then you start to kind of open yourself up a little bit to things that maybe you felt guilt about. Not that we don't still have that, I think, from time to time, you know, when you've lost somebody, but I started to like open myself up to things that I thought maybe were a little bit like, okay, I deserve a little, you know, break here from all of this. And then something would go wrong with that. I felt it really, really took me out. You know what I mean? And there were a couple of moments during that time where I felt like, I just was like, what am I doing? Like, what's it matter? You know what I mean? Like, here I am, I'm trying. I feel like I'm making strides. I feel like I'm, you know, And then this just happens, like whatever it was. It was this thing or that thing or whatever. That was when I feel like I was my most weak in temptation, because I just felt defeated.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know why I didn't take a drink. I mean, I think I really wanted to, probably during a couple of things that happened. But then I thought, as bad as this feels right now, it's going to feel so much worse if you're drunk.
I like that.
And I think that's what kind of like held me back and kept me sober, because I think I had a couple of moments where I was just like, what does it even matter? And I really was like being very negative, and I was really like, I don't care. I'm just going to just drink. Like, what's the point?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But there's something in me that said, I knew that it wouldn't be better. It would be worse.
Yeah. So in sobriety, self-care is really crucial. I know just in, talking with Trey about his journey that, that's one of the first things that actually, when you are addicted to something, that is something that is like on the back burner about that, right? So were there certain things that you did to prioritize that during your grief journey? And while you were mourning the loss of your husband, I know that alone is hard for self-care too, because we just, you think that your world's ended.
Yeah.
And so you become that and you don't feel like doing much. So was there any certain thing that you did as far as self-care? I know you just had mentioned you went on a trip, and actually took some time for yourself to reflect. Was there anything that stands out that...
I think in the beginning I didn't care.
Yeah.
So there was no self-care.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously we've talked a lot about, my drinking and my sobriety, and the fact that I guess I cared enough not to, start drinking.
Yeah.
Because in the beginning I felt like nothing mattered. And so there was no care. When my husband passed away, I felt like there was this black screen. It was just like a wall. Right. And I'd always, no matter what I was going through in life, a breakup or whatever, I always felt like there was something I was looking forward to, some type of goal I wanted to achieve, or some type of ideal I wanted to have someday, with whether it be with a relationship or a family or whatever. And I feel like at that moment, like it went black. There was nothing. So I didn't do a lot of self-care in the beginning, to be honest. Right. I ate a lot. I ate a lot of ice cream. In the process of doing all my neighbor's yard work, my one neighbor worked at a grocery store, and he'd bring me pints of ice cream like crazy, and I would eat them within like 5 minutes.
Yeah.
So, but then after a while, that started to shift a little bit, and I did start working out quite a bit and taking care of myself. And I remember talking to my therapist on the phone one time, and I had said about how I washed my face every night before I got in bed. And she's like, okay. And I'm like, I never wash my face before I go to bed. And she's like, but you're doing something to take care of yourself. It's like self-care and like self-focus. So like, it can be something little.
Yes.
Like that. I did go to San Diego to visit a friend, as I mentioned, who was living out there at the time. And I did take a break, I feel like, from my grief. It's weird because I feel like when you lose somebody and then a certain amount of time goes by, like there are some people, they don't want to like bring it up, bring it up.
Oh yeah.
And I'm like, listen, if someone will bring up something about my husband, Mike, and I would like start to cry or like have tears in my eyes or whatever, they're like, oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to make you cry. And I'm like, you didn't make me cry. Like my husband died.
Yeah.
Like that's what's making me cry. Yeah. You can't avoid it. You can't not talk about it. I think it's harder when people don't talk about it.
Yes.
Because you're like, what, he's just like forgotten. He's just like not here. We're all just like, what, moving on. I don't think that that's people's intention at all, right?
It's not.
But I think they're so uncomfortable about it. They don't know how to bring it up. So I feel like going kind of in my journey, when I've come across other people who've had a loss, I try not to shy away from it. Like, I try
not to be
ask,
awkward.
you don't have to be, like in their face about it, but like, it's nice to just acknowledge and to recognize, that they have this private and silent journey that they're going on. So I think that, taking care of yourself and doing things like that, but also like, when you talk about it, that's also, I think, self-care. Therapeutic, whatever you want to call it, but it's a part of self-care. And even like just doing this, it's like, it's been 4 years, a couple months ago. And I was like, like, can I, be a guest on your podcast?
Yes.
Because I feel like it was like it's a form of therapy still. Like it's always like an ongoing battle that you'll fight, whether it's talking to people, telling your story. I've told my story to so many people, there are just so many things that intertwine with it, and I think that's kind of, one of the things that I haven't really talked about yet is like, obviously I lost my husband and I'm sober, and those two things kind of, collided at the same time. But, there's been a lot of other things too. And those are things that you kind of have to figure out how to get through and still take care of yourself.
I love that you mentioned that this is something that you are continuously having to go back and revisit and think about the small things, the small self-care, the tiny little, moments that actually move you forward along this journey. When I was moving forward and, I found love again, I didn't think that it was appropriate for me to still grieve. I needed to have the look that everything was good. And, in my situation's different from you. I met someone and I have kids now. And so that's a whole other journey. And so I feel like I pushed it down even more.
Yeah.
Because I did move forward and I did find love again. So it was hard for me. And now I'm actually 19 years later and I'm just I'm just starting this process, you know? So I just love how it's so different with everyone, and in all the stories that, we're trying to get on our podcast to just make known that truly there is no timeline. There is no certain way.
No recipe, no exact science to it. It's
because I feel like you're here and it's 4 years, right? And you have done a lot of processing. You've done a lot of healing. And maybe in the fourth year after, Kyle passed away, I probably felt like I was at the top of the world and I had, really tackled it. But in all reality, I'm sitting here now and I didn't tackle anything.
Yeah. Well, it's so I think grief, and especially the loss of a spouse, like it's a wound that is very deep and very permanent. And I've heard so many people say different things, different ways about grief and all this kind of stuff, and I think one of the things is that you don't get over it.
Yeah.
Okay?
Never.
You never get over it. You just find a way to move through it. So in your situation, maybe because you found love, you kind of were like, okay, I'm going to focus on this and I'm not going to and so that's okay.
Yeah.
Right. Because obviously you're doing it now.
Yeah.
You're doing the work now. And my story is, very early, I feel like, compared to yours, but regardless, it doesn't matter. Right. Yeah. You do what you do and you deal with what you deal with and you do what you need to do at the time. Yeah. And maybe it was supposed to be like this for you. Yeah. Maybe you were supposed to have, find love again and have children and, and then, it was going to come back up and you were going to deal with it. And that's not a bad thing because look what you're doing with it. Like if you dealt with it then, you probably wouldn't be doing this podcast or the other things that you're doing to help people, deal with their grief. So,
and it's a lot of it is finding purpose and, and that's what I try and I talk about, within this community. And I tried to make known that it has taken a while for me to find the purpose, because at first you're like, who does this happen to? And with my story,
but a lot of people,
it is, but you always think it's not going to be me, and with mine, plane crashes, they happen, but they don't.
Yeah, they say you're more likely to die in a car crash than a plane crash.
Yes. And so I was that person. Who does this happen to? This is just on TV. This is, someone,
it's somebody else's life.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Yeah.
Yes. And so for me, I was then living that reality. Right. And I don't know. It's so odd. Everything I feel like with death and grief and
it is. And I think one of the things you and I were talking about before we started filming was I said something that I've kind of thought for a while, and that is that, you know, and what I've had to deal with in my life is now this is my life, right? This is my norm. I feel like this was always meant to be like this, right? Like this was always going to happen. Like he was always going to die the way he died and the time he died. And I was always going to have to go through this. And maybe it was so I could connect with people. Maybe it's so I can help people. Maybe it's just like a self, you know, awakening or whatever you want to call it. But like, it's strange because, you know, you have to get through something that you think is for other people. I mean, just like, you know, you see so many people, like you hear stories or whatever, like that have lost their spouses, and you don't know until like you go through that. Like, oh my God, like that is like something really, really heavy and deep. And these people carry it around every day. And they go through life and they deal with life. And some of them are mothers or, you know, fathers, and they, you know, they have to be a parent and they have to like push that down and push that aside and, you know, or just in general, the stressors of life and work and whatever it may be, but they're dealing with that. And so I was like, well, that's never going to happen to me. It's so rare. You know what I mean? And then it does. And you're like, well, I'm in this club now that, you know, is like, it's so, so hard. But you do have to have a purpose. And for you, I mean, like I said, you probably wouldn't be doing what you're doing if you had dealt with it before. So there's a reason why you didn't deal with it before. And there's a reason why, you know, the time period of your life when you found love and, you know, had kids and had a family and all of that stuff was the time slot for that, you know? And now is the time slot for doing what you're doing. You know? It's definitely like, obviously I'm 4 years in, and there are some days where this is a norm and I have it all together. But most of the time I don't, you know? I mean, that's the other thing too, is like people who might watch this or anything else might be like, well, you know, she went through that and she's got it all together and she's fine, you know? Trust me, I'm not fine.
We're not fine.
We're not fine. But, you know, one of the things that I might surprise people in general about me is that I've always been an extrovert. I've always been the life of the party. I've always been the one out and about and, you know, being super social. And since my husband passed away, I'm kind of the opposite. I feel like I identify with being an introvert. I go out and I do things and I force myself, but like I don't always want to. Even when it's just like going and having like a simple interaction with somebody, I think something that I've done like 100 times. Like I get anxiety about it.
That's funny how that shifts, right?
Yeah.
That, you know, because the anxiety came in full force for me. Never had it before. And even more so as I go along this journey, I feel it's there.
And I don't let it show, you know, I mean.
Oh yeah, we have that strong exterior.
But I feel it, you know what I mean? Even like the simplest thing where I have to go meet somebody for something or whatever. And I just like, I have this anxiety where I literally want to like pull the blinds down, get in my pajamas and get in bed. And I obviously, and I say I don't know where that stems from. I mean, obviously it stems from, you know, trauma. And loss, but I don't know where the exact way it's manifesting itself. Like, I don't know why that's like that. Maybe because it was during COVID and maybe I was alone a lot when my husband passed because of the, you know, obviously everybody was quarantining. You know, I actually tried therapy, but at the time it was like online and I hated that. That was terrible. But it was just like another kind of way to be separated from people. And so maybe it kind of has to do with that, you know? Like I feel I'm antisocial a lot, but it's not like people see it. It's just like, it's something inside. I don't know how to explain it to people.
With you. I'm right there with you because there are a lot of things that I feel are just deep within me. And because I'm very much an extrovert too. However, I don't know too, it could be just that we're getting older, right? And so everything changes.
Right? That's true.
So I don't know if that's it or if there is just something that just changed us during that traumatic time because, you know, and I was talking to another guest that I had on the podcast that her husband actually died of cancer as well. And so we kind of were touching on, you know, you had to take care of your husband, right? When he was sick and she did too. I didn't have that. Mine was actually like so traumatic. Is there anything that you want to talk about that you haven't already said that I can kind of pose a question on?
No, I think like when we kind of like maybe just like kind of like at the end, maybe I could just say kind of like where I'm at now.
Yeah. And I want you to want you to give some takeaways to like our audience too. Yeah. Okay. So now that you're 4 years into this grief journey from your husband passing away due to cancer, is there anything that you like have a passion for now? Like things that you do? I know that just in talking with me, you talk about rescues and you do a lot of that. Yeah. I feel like that's something that brings you joy and happiness. Tell me a little bit about that and things that just,
Yeah. Well, it's something I was actually doing during the time I was with my husband, but I do cat rescue. And so I work with a rescue and in Northern Virginia that we do a lot of different things with sick and injured animals, abandoned animals, bottle babies, everything, that you can imagine. And it does bring me joy. The rescue is actually called Pets Bring Joy. It's kind of ironic, but so petsbringjoy.org. But yeah, I feel like it does give me purpose. And I feel like, helping animals, like when I hear about like a sad story with a person, like sometimes I'm like, oh, that's sad, and then I hear about a sad story with an animal. I'm like, oh my gosh,
Right. Well, I think that, and you had mentioned to me too, that there have been instances where something has happened to these homeowners and what they've died or something tragic and you've gone in actually.
Yeah. I go and I help. Sometimes I'll help get a cat out of a house that, the owner has passed away and the family can't catch the cat, that kind of thing. So I help people and I do different things with that. I do trapping of cats that are either lost, they've gotten out of the house, or just cats that are community cats that need rescue for some type of thing. So I do have a passion in that. And I feel like that's something that I've figured out later in life. I've probably maybe 10 years I've been doing that now. And it definitely is something that makes me feel like, I'm part of something bigger than myself. Yeah. And my grief journey, and you need a break from it. You absolutely do. I mean, I think for anybody who has had some type of tragic loss, like I'm not saying that on day one or even month one that you're like, yeah, just take a break. It doesn't work that way. It's a mindset. And I think that when you get to a certain point in your journey and it's not the same for everybody, it's okay to have a break. And that means different things to different people. For me, like I said, I went and visited a friend. I just took time to just kind of like not think about it. And I do think that was the first time I had like kind of not thought about it every day, all day. I mean, part of the thing is like with loss is that, you are going to always have it and it's always going to be there. And, it's okay to talk about it and it's okay to, share it. And it's okay to not, and there's no recipe for this. I think it's different for every person, but you have to find something that, makes you feel good and makes you have purpose. Even if it's just like in the beginning of when you first lose someone, is staying busy, doing things for others. I would help my neighbors with yard work and different projects and different friends would have stuff going on. And I'm like, I'm there, you know what I mean? But I also realized in doing those things to keep busy and keep my mind occupied, that they were also things that I enjoyed. And I enjoyed, helping other people. I've always been like a caretaker, that's just kind of who I am. Yeah. And I think that, taking care of other people and, helping them through different things, whether it's something, emotional or it's just something that they need help because they don't have the bandwidth to do something, in their home. Well, those are things that like, I feel like make me feel like, okay, there's a purpose in all of this.
As I'm sitting here listening to you, that's 100% what you did for your husband. So you are totally doing the thing that you did for him.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that's beautiful. Okay. So,
I mean, the death of my husband was so hard on me. I really didn't think I would like survive it. I feel like a lot of what I have kind of talked about here is me and my journey and the things that I've done, because that's so relevant to what I can offer someone. Yeah. But make no mistake, like it was the hardest time of my life. And I was devastated, when he died. But we did, I took care of him, but he took care of me too, you know? And we had something very special. And I don't know that you can replicate that. But I think that just like in your case, it is possible to find love again. And no two loves are alike anyway.
Yep.
Yep. And so he was a very good man. he was like the most exciting person in the room. You know what I mean? And I will always miss him. You know, I will miss him forever. Sometimes when I talk about losing him, it's very emotional. Yeah. There's a lot of tears and it's like, I can't even catch my breath, you know? And then other times it's like very matter of fact, you know? I feel like today I'm in a matter of fact mood.
Yeah. I'll do the other for you.
Yeah. But, you know, it is what it is. You know what I mean?
Well, we get in
some days are like this and some days are very emotional.
And we get in our mode of telling our story. And the purpose here is that you are here and a guest on this podcast to hopefully speak to, even if it's one person, just about your journey and how they're all different and the things that worked for you and the things that are continuing to work for you and how you're still finding purpose. And that's what we're here for.
Yeah. And I've done that, I think, along the way too. Yeah. I mean, some of the other things, like I've had some other losses. After my husband died, I've lost a few friends, tragically. One of them in a tragic car accident. And her boyfriend, who I had never met, I reached out to him and I connected with him. I don't know why I felt that I did that, but I did. I felt like there was a reason why. And we kind of connected and became friends and would talk. And he also was trying to stay sober. Like she had helped him get sober. And the time that him and I spent together, like, I feel like I wanted to help him because I was a little bit further in my journey. Yeah. And so, you know, there have been things like that that have happened. And so he also is still sober because he wanted to stay sober because, you know, of like, she was so proud of him. And, you know, I know my husband was proud of me. And so there are things like that I think that kind of come up in your story because it's all constantly building. Yeah. And when you have other types of loss after this significant loss, like those things are really, really hard to get through. Not because they were like the quote unquote main event, you know what I mean, of your tragedy story, but because you are already so fragile. Yeah. And then other things happen and you're like, you know, you feel like it's like, how much more can I take, you know? And maybe, I don't know. I mean, I'm a big believer in that God will never give you more than you can handle in a day. I mean, he's really pushed me to the limit. Yeah. It's really close a couple of times.
So if you had just one thing that you could reach one person or multiple people, you know, through this one, just something, what would it be to give our audience in this space?
Yeah, I think that you have to give yourself grace because it's hard. Yeah. It's complicated stuff. Yep. It's sad stuff. It's very heavy stuff. Yeah. And we're going to have a little bit of guilt sometimes, you know, survivor's guilt and all that. But I think you just have to give yourself a little bit of grace. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to prove to anybody that you're okay. You know, you just have to find a way to live a life that, you know, you're okay with. And that sounds simple. Sometimes it is and sometimes it isn't, you know? Yeah. But just don't be so hard on yourself because it's hard stuff.
Yeah. And, you know, I think that, you know, another guest of mine, that's the same exact thing that she said is allowing grace for yourself. And I know just as women, we have a hard time with that in general. Yeah. Just being a woman, you know, whether you're a mom or you're an aunt.
We're like trying to be all things to all people all the time.
So we already have a hard time with grace and allowing ourselves to be less than, I guess, for what we think we should be. So even taking it one step further, you know, giving grace in this kind of space and in this journey, I think is so important. Yeah. So important.
Yeah, you have to.
Okay, so tell us where you're at now. Is there anything that we can do for you, you know, and just, you know, we're going to kind of wrap it up here, but, you know, just tell us about where you're at right now and, you know, in your journey currently.
Yeah, I mean, I feel really blessed, you know. I feel like out of all of this tragedy and all of this grief, a lot of good things have happened. Yeah. I feel like I've made stronger and deeper connections with people, not necessarily related to the situation, but just people I come across in everyday life. For all different kinds of reasons. Yep. But I feel like I've been able to connect with people on a deeper level than I ever did before because I realized the fragility, like life is so fragile.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And you know, there's no guarantee. Tomorrow is not guaranteed.
Nope.
And so, but I really find a lot of happiness, you know, in connecting with people in that way, connecting with you, connecting with other people that, you know, that have had a similar journey is really therapeutic for me. But just in general, you know, I had this mindset when my husband died. I'm never dating again. I'm never going to love again. I'm never getting married again. Like,
I think we all say it.
Pretty hardcore about that for the first year or two.
Yeah.
And I definitely think that my position on that has softened quite a bit.
Yeah.
I had a couple of false starts in relationships that were definitely hard for me, that they didn't work out because when you actually put yourself out there again after the loss and then something doesn't work out.
Oh yeah.
It's like, it's kind of traumatic. Actually.
Oh yeah. I'm sure you're back down to square one, right?
It's kind of traumatic for so many reasons, but I actually am dating someone now who is an awesome man. He's such a good person. He accepts all of the crazy history about my life. He does not judge me for it. And so incredibly patient and kind. And I'm super lucky.
Oh,
he actually was friends with my husband. And we've been dating almost a year now. Last year around this time, when it was the 3-year anniversary of my husband's death, there was a gathering of a bunch of people that were all kind of in that group of friends through bowling. And that was the actual day of the anniversary of my husband's death. So his very best friend was there, and he talked about it a little bit and just was like, hey, just like reminding everyone, like, today is the anniversary. We lost, we lost Mike. And so the guy I'm seeing now, his name is also Mike. He was like, wow, it's been 3 years, and he had said that, he always liked me as a person. And, he wanted to make sure that it was an appropriate amount of time. Like, he didn't want to act like he was, kind of swooping in. And so he approached me after that. So,
oh, I love that.
Yeah. And it's kind of funny because my husband always would say what a good person he was. And he's such a good man. And like, do you have any friends? And we need to find him somebody. And it's just kind of funny, how it all worked out. But I guess the kind of the closing of that is that I know what a good person he thought my current boyfriend was. And so I think that I know that he'd be okay with it. And I know that, like, if there was anybody like he could pick in the world, it would probably be him. But I certainly didn't see it coming. I didn't know he was interested in me in any way. But it's I'm so lucky, to have him in my life. And I feel really, really blessed. So.
And I think that, it's incredible how far you've come, the things that you've dealt with, your sobriety. Like, you are such a rock star. And I am blessed to know you. I'm so glad that we had that one mutual friend to connect us.
Yes.
And I know there's more to come. And I think you are just going to continue to keep proving that there is purpose and there is so much more life to live.
Yeah. I'm trying. Yeah. I'm not giving up. You know?
No, you're doing great. And I just want to say thank you again for being on our podcast.
Absolutely. You are amazing. You and your husband have definitely have a very inspiring story. And so it's definitely something that I look up to. And I feel like, when you meet people, you get connected with people for a reason. And so I'm very, very grateful that we did connect through our mutual friend. And
yes, me too.
That, hopefully our friendship just continues to build. So.
Yes, I hope so too. Oh gosh. Well, thank you again for being on the Resilience Reborn podcast. And I hope that you all listening or watching have been able to get something really wonderful, just even if it's one thing out of this podcast and Jennifer's story today. And just thank you so much for being in this space. Have a good day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you for joining us on the Resilience Reborn podcast. We hope today's stories provided you hope and inspiration to always be resilient.
If you enjoyed today's episode, please consider subscribing to our channel. You can also interact with us on our Facebook community page, which you can find by searching Resilience Reborn on Facebook.
Remember, through resilience and recovery, you are never alone. Together,
we grow stronger. See you next time.